everybody, wait a minute. Everybody, wait a minute. Well, everybody, wait a minute. Everybody, wait a minute.
Good morning, everybody. What's up, world? Frank. It's perfect, though. It sets the vibe. But again, what we're going to do today, talking about Dr. James Turner. bunch of folks are going to be coming through in the next couple of hours. So definitely get everybody, round everybody up. Let's smile. Let's laugh. Let's dance. I love how I left the cowbell part. Shout out to Vibe Dad at D3 Vibe and all your social media. That's VYBE. All right, folks, are going to start showing up here in a minute. So definitely invite all your folks.
Keep me right there, everybody. Wait a minute.
Greetings, everybody. Everybody, wait a minute. I mixed what I like. Black Power Media. Back in a second.
Let me show these suckers how to ball out here. Oh man, let's get this together here. Oh, layup. Oh no. Shot. Oh, three. Oh, it's like Brick City out here. Mid-range. Oh my goodness, I can't buy a bucket out here. I missed the whole damn basket. Oh my goodness. What's going on, man? My game is looking trash. Oh, here we go. Black Power Media shirt. Now we cooking. Tree. I'm taking all three of y'all with these right here. Between the legs. Oh my goodness. Behind the back. Layup. Oh, did he just do a reverse? He is in beast mode out here. I ain't gotta look. It's falling. Oh my goodness. This guy is going 3, 2, 1. Kobe. Nice. Black Power Media, baby. Nice. Empower yourself. Go get you some of that Black Power Media gear. Right here, blackpowermedia.org. Yeah.
You are here on I Mix What I Like. You may check us out on imixwhatilike.org, where you can see all these other shows and what my daddy likes and other cool things.
I mix what I like.
All right. Yes, indeed. Welcome, everybody. What's up, world? To another edition. Welcome to another edition of I Mix What I Like right here at Black Power Media. Again, I'm Jared Ball. Very happy to be your host. A lot on the channel. Make sure you've subscribed, clicked all your bell notifications so you don't miss anything that has happened, all the new stuff coming, and so on and so forth. Going to be talking over the next couple of hours. I've said my piece. So I wanted to invite as many others as we could get to join us this morning and going forward, as some have said that they're not ready to talk publicly. Some were not able to make it. I haven't been able to reach everybody that Dr. Turner has impacted and continues to influence. So we may be doing these just on and off forever, which is necessary and welcomed here. But as many as I could get to join us this morning are going to come through over the next couple hours to share their experiences with Dr. Turner and their views. So definitely make sure you've invited as many people as you can. Put this in your social media streams. If you're seeing this later after the live, welcome to you as well, and do the same. Because all that we're going to discuss this morning, I'm sure whether you knew Dr. Turner or not, whether you've had a direct experience with him or Africana studies or not, all that's going to come up is going to be relevant to so many of the discussions and work that you are all doing. So do all of those things. First up, it's perfect that I was just holding up this book because it was published on Diasporic Africa Press. Whose founder is joining us now, Professor of Africana Studies, my main man, Dr. Kwasi Konadu. What's up, sir? Greetings to you. Welcome. You are first up this morning. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Good to see you too, man.
Yeah, man. So like I said, I don't really have anything particularly organized beyond just inviting people on. As I said, I've had a chance to share my 2 cents on an experience with Dr. Turner. You preceded me by a couple of years to the Africana Studies and Research Center at Cornell University. Have known Turner and his family for quite a while. You obviously are the publisher of this incredible book, which edited by Dr. Scot Brown, who I expect to be joining us as well, among others this morning. But anyway, let me just let you go and share what you like.
Well, I appreciate it. I don't know really where to start, but I'll start this way, which is that I am, among yourself and a number of others, were invited to the funeral services, and I tried my hardest to get there, but it didn't happen. And I'm not sure why it didn't happen, but there's another story there that connects directly to Dr. Turner, which is that I booked my flight, my hotel, rent a car, and I was ready to go. I got to BWI and got there early, in fact, because I wanted to make sure, because this was the last flight leaving BWI to Syracuse, because there were no flights to Ithaca. As you might have experienced, or others might have experienced, is that it was very difficult on short notice to get lodging, get flights, and get things sorted out. Definitely to Ithaca, and certainly, in my case, of Syracuse. And so strange things happened. I had a feeling going to the airport about driving. I didn't know why. I said, well, driving is about 6 hours, from Maryland to Ithaca. I said, well, it's out of the question doing that, to and from. Then as I'm in the airport mulling over that decision of not to drive, there's a notice that the flight is delayed. And then I said, okay, so I'm reading a book. Then the flight gets in eventually, much later than the delayed time. And I was okay, the flight is here. The airline is here. And then, people, they deplane. Okay, I'm thinking they clean up. Then I see 2 fire trucks behind the plane. And in half an hour, there are 3 fire trucks behind the plane. And there's no word from the staff of the airline. Then this is about probably 11:15 p.m. And so when it was going on, people are speculating, they're creating their own theories. Is the plane on fire? And so on. Then the plane, they say, well, great news. We're going to board in a few minutes. The mechanics are checking that makes things clear. And I said in my inner voice, I said, if this plane cannot fly, tell me right now. And in 10 minutes, the staff of the airline switched gears and said, well, the plane is inoperable. It will not be able to fly tonight. And they said, well, we're going to switch you all to another airplane down on a different gate. As I'm walking to the gate, I said, I don't have a feeling about this. And, I check in with my wife. I check in with the rent-a-car, because they close at Syracuse at 12. It's already 12. And the new flights will leave at 12:30, which means I won't have a rent-a-car. I have to wait in the airport until 6, 7 in the morning. And so I just said, let me call the hotel, call the airline and just cancel it. And, call the message to Janice Turner, Dr. Turner's wife, let her know what happened, and that tried my best. But here's a lesson that I learned from Turner, which is that what bottled up in that moment is that even for his service and so much care and so much devotion attached to it, is that when you force things to happen, it probably is something that should not happen in the way that you're forcing it. And I felt myself trying to force something to happen, even on an occasion that was very dear and close to me, as it was to you and other folks. And so it was, for me, a classic Turner moment, because as many of us recall who knew him, is that he wasn't a fast speaker. He took his time. And I think that was deliberate, because the purpose of speech is to be understood. And so his pace and his motion and his movement, it ran through that entire moment, right? And that moment was just filled with so many paradoxes. But I listened in the moment, because that's key to learning. And I learned so much from Turner, and that learning came from just listening, and that listening came from not forcing it. A lot of it just came naturally, and listening So I learned by listening. I learned by not forcing. And when I did that, things worked out pretty well.
Right on. No, I appreciate you sharing that. And Dr. Asi Lumumba, thank you for joining us. And everybody, I'm just going to ask for forgiveness in any inelegance and segues. I'm just going to bring people up as they show up and jump in, and just let everybody share. Dr. Asi Lumumba, you spoke at his service. You obviously knew Dr. Turner for a long time. As I've been saying, I've had my chance to say my 2 cents on this on Dr. Turner. So I want you all to share. I don't know what your schedule is, how much time you have. So take as much time as you like and join the conversation, please, and share anything that you'd like to.
Thank you so much, Jared. And it's nice to see you, Kwasi. Well, you were talking about airplane. I had a similar experience. I had not traveled since early 2020. My last trip before the COVID was to pay tribute to another giant, Samir Amin, who passed away. So I went to Dakar. There was a great service. And so it was my first international trip recently, this month, to go to Zambia for 2 conferences. One in relation to a colleague, Professor Muna Ndulo, who was the director of the Institute for African Development, whom I succeeded in 2020. And the second meeting is an annual major conference of an organization called the Youth Bridge Foundation. It's based in Accra. And they meet every year, a conference called the Convergence. So the youth from the continent and the diaspora. I had in the past taken students from the Africana studies, from Cornell in general, from the community in general. I was sharing in Lusaka recently that during one of the trips, I had in the group one of our graduate students from Africana Studies, a person of a descendant of the terrible experience of the transatlantic enslavement. I had a student whose parents came to the US when she was little from Ghana. She literally kissed the soil when we landed in Accra. And I had also students, my own children, 2 of them, we went back. So I was very excited that we were resuming the annual meeting of the Youth Bridge Foundation face to face. But then the news came that Professor Turner has transitioned to the world of the ancestors. I said, I have to go back. I didn't know the program. I didn't know anything else, but I had to make arrangement to come back. Well, Lusaka is not, the next place nearby, Southern Africa. So I asked my assistant at the Institute for African Development, and Professor Turner made a couple of miracles. I had to fly from Lusaka to Doha, Qatar, and from Qatar to Philadelphia. And they told me on one of the legs of the trip, there was only 1 seat left. So when they tell you there's no seat, what can you do? It's just like when they tell you the plane can't fly, what can you do? So I was most grateful that it was a long, long flight, about 7 hours from Lusaka to Doha, and about almost 14 hours from Doha to Philadelphia, and then a long, long, long delayed flight from Philadelphia to Syracuse. And so I parked my car in Syracuse on my way out. So I drove. I arrived here 1 a.m. the night of Thursday to Friday, and I was most grateful. When I came, I didn't know the program. So it was during the day of Friday that I learned what the program was going to be. And I'm most grateful. I thank the Lord and the ancestors and Professor Turner for having facilitated my return to pay my tribute to him. Well, as I said, I met Professor Turner the first time with my boyfriend, who later became my husband. We were both PhD students at the University of Chicago in the early 80s, and Professor Turner had come there to speak. We went. Every talk about, some kind of progressive message, we went. Kwame Ture is coming to other side of the city, we went. So we went to listen to Professor Turner. We were so impressed, so inspired. And as I mentioned, the next day we saw him walking through campus, he was talking deliberately, slowly, but he walked fast. That's the two things that we noticed. So my boyfriend and I were commenting, wow, he's so sharp. He's so inspiring. But the way he walks, you know that he has a sense of direction. You know that he's going for a purpose. He's not just wandering around. So anyway, that was it. Back in the 80s, I had no idea that we would become colleagues later. So of course I finished, went to Africa, worked there, and came back to the US as a Fulbright. When you're Fulbright coming this way, not Fulbright going the other way, you need a home institution. And I had two others that I prefer not to name, but in the end I chose Cornell because of Africana studies. So I came to Cornell because of Africana studies. And Professor Harris had a program then, the Ford Foundation program for 1 year visit. So I also received that fellowship. So it was a really great when I came here, early 1991 spring when I came. And normally for a few months, and 31 and some months later, I'm still here. You know, Kwasi, the African proverb, the Akan proverb, is a good source that pulls the seat. When you're visiting someone, family, and they're having a meal, they invite you, it's very impolite to say, no, I'm not eating, I have already eaten, whatever the reason. And they would insist that you join. So out of courtesy, you stand far and you take a little piece and you eat. But it tastes so good, you take another piece. And then in the end, you sit. And then you pull your seat closer and closer. By the time the meal is over, you're part of the circle. That's what happened when I came to Africana Studies and stayed. So I have been fortunate to have had Professor Turner as my mentor. As I explained, you know, the hashtag Cornell taught me. Well, he didn't teach me in the classroom, in the formal setting. And for you being in education, you know there are three dimensions: the formal education, the schooling, but also the informal, non-formal, that are equally powerful and mutually reinforcing. So on the front of non-formal and informal, I received enough experience to also claim that at Cornell, Turner taught me. We're on the same floor. Every day I saw him, I went to greet him, and I came out every time enriched with even a short conversation, long conversation, debate. I come back from Africa from a trip, I go to greet him And then we start a conversation. The vast knowledge and generosity of Professor Turner had transformed my own life. So I was happy to have the opportunity to share some of those words with everybody, and anything else that the program permits, I will continue to share. So thank
Well, I
you.
mean,
Thank
no,
you.
thank you. One thing, Kwasi, before you respond or add on, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this too. But Professor Asi Lumumba, the other day, you said something about Dr. Turner having attained the status of an ancestor even in life. Could you say a few words about that? Because I don't recall hearing too much of that
Yeah,
before. Yeah.
yeah. I have a brother colleague from Cote d'Ivoire who teaches at the University of Pennsylvania, and he wrote a book a few years ago about an Ivorian, Bernard Dadier. You can check his name. He's among the first generation of African scholars out of the colonial experience. Wrote a lot. And he was 100 some, 105 or something like that. So he was writing a book about him. And the title of the book in French is L'Ancestre Vivant, the living ancestor. It means that he had already attained the status of ancestor. And he is de facto in his thinking in terms of people he has seen in his life who have already left. He's connected very much with the other world, the world where the ancestors are. So in this case, the world where the John Henry Clark are now sitting in, operating from, Professor Turner was very much part of that already, in terms of the wisdom, in terms of becoming a reference, in terms of being there when you need him. That's what the ancestors are. Wherever you are in trouble, you call them. So that's what Professor Turner had become. So he was a reference, and he had that patience. Not once, I think I wrote in the Cornell Chronicle, I told them, I go to visit him to say hello, sometimes late in the evening or early evening. Everybody who had been here knows that I work late at night. That was a strategy I developed when I had young children. You go home, you eat, you sing, they go to bed, and then I come to the office. That's something I learned from my grandmother, that whatever you can do, do it, do the most. Even if you have to redo it the next day, you'll do it differently. You will improve it because you had done it. You cannot transform anything you had not done. So that's a philosophy that has carried me across. So sometimes Professor Turner also stayed a bit late sometimes. So I go to say hello. And visibly, many, many times, I saw that he was getting ready to go. But he has never once told me, sister, come back tomorrow. He never told me that. Have a seat. Always invited me to take a seat. And then we started to talk. And so that's the ancestor who is patient, the ancestor you invoke, the ancestor whose wisdom you seek. So that's the idea of the living ancestor. He was part of this world, but he had already attained the status of the patience of the ancestor. So, as I said, it felt like, although we feel the void, but it felt at the same time like he just made a very smooth and quick transition to a world that he was already part of. So that is the notion of the living ancestor.
No, thank you for that. That's beautiful. And we see Rosa Clemente joining us. I just asked her to grab some headphones, so she'll be back in a second. Professor Konadu, jump back in. And again, I'm not. Everybody, please forgive me. I don't know everybody's schedule and how you all are welcome to stay as long as you like, or leave or come back, whatever you know. But yeah, jump on in. What?
Sure.
Please add on to any of that.
Certainly. And Professor Lumumba was on my committee along with Dr. Turner when I was a student, grad student at Africana. So we share several connections through and with him. The way I see it, and I'm sure many would feel the same way. I had a different, not a better or worse, but a different connection with Turner. And that came, as President Lumumba mentioned, informally. It came through the informal way. So, for example, when I was there between 97 and 99, 97, 99, there at the Africana Center. And I intentionally say Africana because I was never really at Cornell. My experience was Africana Center, Ujima, Southside Community Center, where we had the Saturday school called Tankine, and back to my apartment off campus, which I share with two other brothers. So that was my orbit. That was sort of my the gravitational pull of my experience. The only part of Cornell I really know or remember is the Olin Library, for obvious reasons. Other than that, my experience was really an Africana experience. And I remember two things stand out is that I got to know Professor Turner beyond my advisor and a member of my committee was through a chance encounter at a Tai Chi class. So I leave the Africa. Well, I'm on North Campus, and I go to UJ and I go to Africana, and I walk from there over to there's a dance studio. At least it used to be. It's a dance studio, not far walk from the Africana Center. And I'm going to take this Tai Chi class. It's the first day. And I get into this, into the dance studio that's being used as a Tai Chi class place. And so, I get in there, look around the room. Of course, the room has mirrors and it has these, bars for obviously dancers. And lo and behold, guess who I see in matching gray sweats? Dr. Turner. And he's stretching. He has one leg up on the bar and he's stretching it out. And so I walk over to him and I say, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "Brother, I'm taking this class." And so we were taking Tai Chi together all semester long in this class. And so what happened as a result of that is that we would walk back together to the Africana Center and we would talk. And that turned into the second, I think, most meaningful connective moment between us was Saturdays. Saturdays, I used to hang out at the Africana Center. Probably wasn't, didn't give me any cool points among my peers, but to me, that was the cool thing. So Turner was there on Saturdays in his office. And so I used to stop by after the Saturday school because he was the advisor for the Saturday school, but more importantly, because he was around. And, he and I used to hang out and just talk. And so it was through the Tai Chi class in terms of our sort of initial non-formal or informal sort of bonding and connection. And then that bonding connection took another level because, he and I would just talk for hours on Saturday. And those two moments, those two events that led into those moments really, brought to my mind when we had the celebration for Dr. Turner at the Africana Center a few years ago. How does he have the time for everyone? I still find it remarkable. I know Malcolm averaged maybe 4 hours of sleep. I think Garvey managed to about 3 or 4 hours of sleep. But I don't know how he managed that and to learn that his children were not depraved or deprived of his attention and love. I don't understand how he did it.
And not just his own children, but his grandchildren, the nieces. Like, it seemed like everybody had constant stories about how Dr. Turner was there to reprimand them or help out here or drive them there or meet them there. I mean, it's like, and to your point, he seemed always there, and in the late nights in the offices, and I mean, all of that. It was like, and he never rushed anybody out. It's crazy how he was able to do all of that.
I mean, certainly, I'm sure others, have secure. So that sort of omnipresence and the energy and stamina to do that. I don't know what, half a century. Is one of the remarkable feats of knowing Turner. So I second that emotion and that call about being a living ancestor, because there's no one that had that sort of transcendental, sensibility and feel about him, that he was always present, and to be always present in so many people's lives in such an intimate way is one of the most remarkable things that runs through my veins, that runs through my at the molecular level. I can feel that, and I'm sure there are thousands of others that probably felt the same way.
And Rose, as I open the floor to you, who else could be friends with both Karenga and Clark?
That's funny.
Anyway, go ahead, Rose, and welcome. Please jump on in.
Oh, hey, everybody. It's good to see y'all. That is funny. Only Dr. Turner could be friends. He could be friends with anybody. That was the whole point. But I met Dr. Turner in 1993. He had come to SUNY Albany around the Malcolm X commemoration committee that he had started to have I think it was like a 3-year plan around really teaching Malcolm X to like a lot of students. I was a student who I never read any Black authors ever, and I went to really good public schools. So I didn't even read Malcolm X until I got to college, kind of thing. So anyway, I had been elected president of the Black Student Union, and my mentor was a woman, Dr. Vivian Verdell-Gordon. Her and Turner co-founded the National Council of Black Studies. And also Dr. Gordon was created Upward Bound. That was one of her biggest successes, in her career. And she was the chair of the Africana Studies Department at SUNY Albany, but they were starting to try to push her out. They were saying she was too radical, too progressive within this Black studies space here at SUNY Albany. And she took a leave of absence for a year. But while she was there, she called me and she said, I'm going to get on a train. I think it was a train. Come to this conference because there's some of, the heavy hitters of Black studies and you need to meet them. So again, Dr. Turner was there, but that's where I met Hakeem Adabudi, Sonia Sanchez. I had met Dr. Jeffries before. And so I just kept in contact with Dr. Turner. And then I started a master's program in educational psychology, and I really didn't like it. So I started working here in Albany at the New York State Assembly. I was chief of staff. And I got a call in the office, and it was Dr. Turner. I was like, how do you know where I'm working? And how do you know this number? He's like, I can find anything. I was like, okay. He said, I was like, okay. He said, do you really want to be in educational psychology?
And I'm sorry, Rosa, this is pre-Google. I just want to emphasize this is pre-internet, pre-Google, by the way.
Oh, yeah, totally pre. Yeah. It was 1993, 95. He's like, I have one slot open. Do you want to come? I was like, yeah. And 10 days later, I was at Cornell. I just left, sold everything here in Albany. So I was there from 96 to 98. And the same, countless meetings, Wednesday nights, Ujima. But at that time, the folks that were there with me, we were also we did a couple shutdowns. We did a couple rallies, one around Tom Ford, who had come to open up a new level of the museum and talk about how much money he was given it. So a bunch of us snuck up in there like we were supposed to be there. But when they went to give him the award, we kind of shut it down. And then we come out and there's like hundreds of people. Dr. Turner's on the side. And he said, "Aren't you supposed to be in my class?" I'm like, "Everybody's here." He's like, "That's why I'm here. Y'all are all here." And he just so supportive. And he's the one that told me my work had to be about looking at the counterintelligence program against not only the young lords, but more radical groups like Los Machaderos, particularly because they were underground and were responsible for some of the Brinks appropriations back in the day, and he really was encouraging me to take a summer in Puerto Rico and try to talk to more independistas. And I told them that was going to be hard because in Puerto Rico, nobody really admits they're an independista until they're like in a safe space, just because of all the violence that has come against independistas. And then I was real lucky because I TA'd with him the whole year. He didn't put me in the library. Everybody else was like, "How are you working with Turner again?" I'm like, "Because he wants me to work with him again. I don't want to actually be in the library anyway." So I had that whole year with him teaching, and he taught me definitely how to be a better professor and, how to be a better writer and how to be able to definitely be able to debate. Like him and Dr. Gordon would always say the same thing. We debate issues, not people, not who they are, not their personalities, which now we're in this time period that's exactly what people do. The attacks, the canceling the attacks, this, that, and I'll stop on this point. Dr. Turner, like, I never saw him raise his voice. Never. I've never saw him be really angry. I mean, I saw sometimes some disappointment, as any one of our professors, if we're not pulling our weight. But he was just the most gracious person ever. He's just a beautiful, nice person, powerful as well. Yeah.
No doubt. Absolutely. Tiffany Willoughby Herard, welcome. Please jump on in and share your 2 cents or whatever. I'm just telling everybody, I don't know what your schedule is, how long you have. Everybody's welcome to stay, come and go as they need to. But jump on in and say what you like, and welcome.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much, Jared, for holding the space, first of all, and just making sure that we get a chance to honor Dr. Turner together and use the platform in this way. I love what you just shared, Rosa, because I was really surprised when I went on to graduate school and worked at different places how restricted student activists were. Because like you, my years 91 to 95 at Cornell were full of participating in protests. And so, when I started work at Irvine and the Muslim 11 stood up and one at a time, students stood up in the ambassador's speech and said one word for justice and freedom. And it was this incredibly disciplined action. And the campus let the local district attorney come for those students. Every last one of them was put out of school, every last one. And that wasn't the tradition I had been raised in Cornell. The tradition I had been raised in Cornell was where our professors would show up for us like that, and where there was an expectation that we would confront the institution. So this like speaking in Ujima, I remember all of the. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you just broke up there a little bit.
Can you hear me?
But yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if you hear me now, but you seem okay.
Yeah, I got you. I remember the fortitude for organizing and bringing important people to the campus. And it was really intense because it was like, regardless of the fact that we were in this tiny town in Ithaca, we were not supposed to be isolated from the rest of the Black world. We were not supposed to be separated from the rest of Black community life. And so I felt like, as an undergraduate student, whether it was, reading the Watu or editing Umoja Sasa, like I was being trained for what it meant to be a grown-up Black liberation movement person as a child, and that I was trusted to do that kind of work. I'll share one last story, and this has to do with being a political science undergraduate. And I was taking a senior seminar in Africana and taking a senior seminar in government. And I remember going into the government class, and I guess having my final was of Blackness, because I was in the middle of.
I'm sorry, Tiffany, say that one more time.
Seminar with. So I was taking two classes at the same time, an Africana class and a government class. The Africana class was with Turner, and it was a senior seminar on African Americans and public policy. I was taking a class similarly named, but with a totally different context, totally different literature in the government department, right? And I took the research that Turner had enabled us to study in the Africana class with me on a day when I stood up in the middle of the political science class and just shouted the professor down, because every single description that he was offering of Black people was pathologizing, caricature, and ugly. And I remember standing up in class and getting up and just saying, there's nothing you can offer me here. You really don't know anything about your subject. And that was because I spent weeks with Turner studying, doing independent research, preparing senior papers, senior thesis level papers. And so I just, what I received from Dr. Turner and Dean Turner was an expectation for excellence and an expectation for self-defense in every space, and that I didn't need to ask anybody to my knowledge. So I
hold on, Tiffany, I didn't get that last part, didn't come through very well.
I said I honor him and revere him with incredible gratitude.
Right on. Absolutely. You know, it was funny that as you all were saying, not only did Turner show up at every rally that I can remember over the years I was at Cornell, or really as was said, I always say the same thing. I was at the Africana Studies and Research Center in Ithaca, but all the rallies that were there, he was in every one of them. And I don't think he ever, even at a rally when he was speaking, even holding a bullhorn, I don't feel like he ever raised his voice and yet was still speaking with incredible power and impact. As everyone else was, performing, and, he would just get up there and it would just be strong and it would work, but it wasn't a lot of, anyway. Anybody else want to jump back in or add on or respond or anything? Oh, Professor Lumumba, hold on. I see Lumumba. Hold on. You're muted. Hold on. Go ahead. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, what I would like to add is Professor Turner, as a sociologist, he took seriously the meaning of that sociology. As a high school student, I became fascinated with sociology because I was wondering, how can you use a scientific instrument to study people, society, the same way we do in science? And that's how I went to sociology, although it will be a long story for another day, at a time when some African government didn't want discipline that trained troublemakers, as they put it. So sociology was not allowed at the University of Université d'Abidjan at the time, but eventually, ironically, I went to France and studied sociology. So I connect with Professor Turner on that ground too. His capacity to read this human lab, this social lab that the sociological eyes train you to have. He could make sense of things easily. The capacity to analyze is one thing that fascinated me. And the observation that is not futile, always meaningful. I mentioned also to the Cornell Chronicle that I was once going to a meeting at Ujima. So we were working together. There was a construction on North Campus. And he asked me, sister, look, where is the workforce diversity? He looked at it. We were walking and seeing the same thing. And he looked and said, where is the workforce diversity? So that's what he also was capable of doing, to set critical eyes on whatever was happening around. And the kindness, the coolness that you mentioned, let me also share. As I mentioned earlier, I came to Cornell as a fellow, both Fulbright and Ford Foundation, Professor Harris's grants. So I was supposed to come for 1 year, for academic year 1990-1991. But I was fortunate that year. I had various offers. And one of them was to go to Paris as a resident fellow at the International Institute for Educational Planning at UNESCO. So I didn't want to really let go that opportunity. So I asked Professor Harris, who was in charge of the program, visiting program, could you allow me to go to Paris for 1 semester and then come to Cornell for the 2nd semester? So he contacted me a few days later and said that they discussed it in the faculty meeting and they agreed to let me go to Paris for the fall 1990. I was most grateful, but since we knew we were going to come here in the spring 91, I wanted to make a living arrangement before I traveled. So we came to Ithaca. That was my first time in May 1990. And I remember when we were living with my husband, when we were living, the way Professor Turner, he was standing there talking with another colleague in the Africana, in the old building, the way he told us, take care, drive safely, the way it radiated that sense of as blessing, of wisdom, that coolness, that's something that I found amazing. And that was even when he was going to a rally and he's going to speak powerfully, but that sense of calm. I listened to a talk a few, maybe 3-4 years ago at the University of Johannesburg. The outgoing vice chancellor gave a talk on Ubuntu and governance, the administrative style based on Ubuntu. And that's one of the things he said. No matter what is going on, keep you cool so you can gather your thought so that you can make proper decision instead of wandering around. So that's something that Professor Turner made me observe, that sense of being cool, with the sense of direction, but being cool and confident. I could say a few more things, but later, especially related to my family, my children, what he and Dean Turner represented for us. So I will come back later for more
Sure.
sharing.
No, thank you very much. And we welcome Baba Conyers, James Conyers. Welcome to the platform.
Thank you so much.
Definitely appreciate you coming through. You please, we're just asking, people jump in and get in and share. I know you have a long history with Dr. Turner. Please.
I hope people don't mind if I jump in right now. I was telling Jared yesterday that unfortunately I'm having some surgery done this week, actually on Tuesday, and I'm going today at 10 o'clock for another prep. I have to get a chest x-ray. I have something they call a trigger finger. Now, what it means is that my finger, I'm not shooting people, folks. What it means is that my finger's locking up and I can't open it. It's something that athletes get, and it's causing me no end of pain. So if you don't mind, I'll jump in right now, because I can only be here a few moments. I see our sister Rosa Clemente has joined us. There is a James Turner before the Dr. James Turner that everybody knows. And I'm one of the people who were privileged enough to know and grow up with the Turner family. For those of you who don't know, Dr. James Turner is a product of Avenue D on the Lower East Side. It's also known as the East Village, Greenwich Village, and it's also known as Alphabet City. And when we all grew up in the same projects. I went to school with his brothers and sisters. And in fact, I came to the ceremony on Saturday with his brother and sister who I grew up with, Wilbur Turner and Harriet Turner. So I grew up with all of the Turners. We were all very, very close as kids. But let me just tell you a little something about the neighborhood, because there's a shaping to Dr. Turner. Lerone Bennett once wrote a book called The Shaping of Black America. And I like to think of this as the shaping of James Turner. The Lower East Side, Avenue D in particular, and all three projects that compose Avenue D, Baruch, Lillian Wall, and Jacob Reith, all the way from Delancey Street on the Lower East Side, all the way to 14th Street. Everybody used to think it was one big project, but it's actually three separate projects divided by a street. Give me 1 second, please. There's actually three separate projects divided by a street. We all went to the same schools. The neighborhood was a very vibrant neighborhood. Jackie McLean, the great jazz legend who I was close to, grew up with Renee McLean, lived in our building. Charlie Parker used to live a couple blocks away. Miles Davis at one point lived a couple of blocks away. The great singer John Lucien lived on 4th Street. The great jazz club, and maybe you've heard of it. Just give me 1 second. This is an important call. I'm sorry.
It's all right. Listen, the folks who know Dr. Turner are important people doing important things all the time. So we can't be mad at that. I am glad he was going in that direction. One of the things that I was very much hoping would happen today is that we would talk a little bit more about Turner's history before at Cornell and all of that, because I had not covered much of that myself.
Right.
But anyway, go ahead, please.
I'm sorry about that. That was my doctor, the office calling to confirm the appointment. Sorry about that. So it was a very, very vibrant neighborhood. All of the jazz legends would be there, be at the house. Quite often, I would see Dr. James Turner, but at that point in time, of course, he wasn't Dr. James Turner. He was just James Turner. We would see him. He would come to Jackie McLean's house, and this is where we met people like Sonny Rollins and Romare Bearden, the great Harlem Renaissance artist, who I didn't even know it was Romare Bearden because I was so young, because they called him Romy. I didn't know the Bearden part until later on. And James knew all of these people. That's where we met. The great scholar Elombe Brath was also there. So it was a very, very vibrant community. However, before James Turner became Dr. James Turner was an icon in the neighborhood. We all looked to him. When James Turner was 19, I was 10. But even then, we knew James Turner. James Turner, let me just put it this way, was not only an icon to us, but he was a leader. As I told Jared the other day, he was a leader and what I would call the neighborhood social club. Now, you can call it by whatever name you want to call it. but he was a leader in the neighborhood social club and a very, very important leader. He was president as well as a few other things. And it was this experience growing up on the Lower East Side, plus his family experience, many of whom were Garveyites, that began to shape James Turner. And I do mean a serious leader. James Turner was one of the people that never, ever forgot where he came from. The organization, well, the community, neighborhood community social group that he belonged to at that particular time was called the Sportsmen. And they protected the neighborhood. So you could call it whatever else you want to call it, but they protected the neighborhood. Later on, when I became a member of a neighborhood social club, which we call ourselves the Omegas, we looked up to James Turner. But one of the important things about James Turner, and he and I did a lot together, whenever he wasn't at his sister's house here in Harlem, he was at my house. And we traveled around together and we talked quite often about all of the academic issues, all of the issues that were involving Black people. But more often than not, this is what I really liked about James Turner, that he was a real legitimate person. Most of the time, we didn't speak about the academic world. We didn't talk about going to Dr. Clark's house or trying to catch up with Dr. Ben, all of those people here in Harlem, or trying to find Professor James Simmons, George Simmons. What we talked about was what it was like growing up on the Lower East Side. And James never forgot where he came from. He always talked about how the Lower East Side shaped his personality, being a leader in the community. And always he called himself a D-boy. He called himself a D-boy. And I told James, well, you know, I'm a D-boy too, because I ain't going to never forget growing up on the Lower East Side and those experiences. When the last conversation that we have right here in my house, that's what we talked about. He came over, he left his sister Harriet's house, came over to my house. We sat and we talked before we went to see Dr. Donald Smith, who was in the hospital. And all we talked about was growing up on the Lower East Side, the projects, the amphitheater on the FDR Drive, the building of Houston Street, the junior high school that we all went to. He went to a different one. He went to junior high school 71. Me, his sisters and brothers, we went to junior high school 22, right on Houston Street, going to Cat's Restaurant. I know you guys know about Cat's Restaurant on the Lower East Side. Well, that was only three blocks from where we lived at. But, you know, he loved, and I think this was mentioned Saturday, one of the things that he loved was jazz music. He loved jazz music. One night, me and Vernon McLean, Jackie McLean's son, went into Slugs, which was the famous nightclub. In fact, I think Slugs was probably as famous, if not more famous, than the Village Gate and the Village Gate Vanguard at that particular time. And remember, Slugs is the place where Lee Morgan was killed at. That was the nightclub. If you see the film Morgan, that's the nightclub right down the block from the projects, 1 block away from the projects. And one night, Vernon McLean and I brought our instruments because we were young musicians trying to be like Freddie Hubbard and Lee Morgan and Jackie McLean. Went to Slugs. We had our instruments with us. We went there to see Lee Morgan. And who's in the club? James Turner. So we sat at the table with James Turner and chewed the fat and had a really, really great time. So what I'm really saying is, because we know of the kudos given to James as an activist and as a scholar, someone who knew Malcolm X. I mean, James knew everybody and whatnot. He knew Malcolm X. He introduced his brother to Malcolm X. One time, even though I was young, he said, well, why don't you come with me up to Harlem and so you can meet Malcolm? I couldn't go because I, just too young. And in fact, at that particular point in time, I wasn't even sure who Malcolm X was. I was 10, 11 years old at that particular time. But let me just jump in right here. It would be when I was 12 years old that as a result of James telling me something about this man named Malcolm X, that I eventually got to see Malcolm X on the corner of 125th Street and 7th Avenue in front of the Teresa Hotel. My godmother, Cleo Sims, owned a hat shop. She was Harlem's milliner at the Hotel Teresa. If you see an old picture of the Hotel Teresa, that hat shop was my godmother. Uptown to see my godmother. Malcolm's on top of a podium and speaking, and the speech was so penetrating that I couldn't move. And at the end of the speech, I asked the man in the crowd, I said, well, excuse me, sir, Mr. Who was that? He said that was Mr. X. I didn't know the Malcolm part yet, just Mr. X. And I went back and I said, James, was this the guy you were talking about? I saw this person, He said, that was it. He said, what do you think? I said, well, he gave me the courage to go over to Michaud's bookstore And if anybody remembers 125th Street, Mr. Michaud had a bookstore that said House of a Million Books about the Negro, that terrified all of us going in there, because at that point in time, you couldn't say anything about Black folks that was positive, except whether you could sing or dance or something of that nature. And so James, in his own way, was grooming me, his brother Stevie, who's now passed, and a few others in the neighborhood. Now, I went through trials and tribulations. As I said, I was in the neighborhood social club, and I got into a lot of different things, but it's because of James Turner. It's because of my close relationship with Dr. John Henry Clark that I was able to pull myself out. But I don't think any of this would have happened had I not grown up in that neighborhood and became an associate of James Turner at that particular point in time. And he was for real. He was as serious about his personal life. And I'm going to use this word. I got to tell you, James Turner was no punk. He was not a punk on any level. I just mentioned he was the president of a neighborhood social club. James was not a punk, all right, on a personal level, and he definitely wasn't a punk when it came to his people. One other thing, one time James and I were attending the Jazzmobile up in Harlem up here just a few years back, and there's a block in Harlem here, I think it's 127th or maybe 128th Street between Lenox and Madison Avenue. So the Jazzmobile pulled up on that block. Now, for those of you who may not be up in Harlem, who don't know that area, that block is almost totally owned by white people now. Every brownstone is owned by a white person, or virtually every brownstone on that block. So we went up to listen to the Jazzmobile. We had our chairs and sit it down. And this woman comes out of her house. What y'all doing? Y'all can't sit here. And, this is a tradition in Harlem. The Jazzmobile, started by Billy Taylor. And true to form, James said to the woman, he said, I don't know where you think you are. This is Harlem, lady. That was James Turner. This is Harlem. And I love the brother. And I told him, I think you were there, Jared, at the big tribute that we had to James Turner a few years back at Cornell. And I got up and I made my presentation at the end. I think I was the last one because I had to leave. And I told James Turner how much he meant to me, how much he means to us, that I love the brother. I've been treated, and I am, for all intents and purposes, a member of the Turner family. And just past Saturday, Janice reinforced it. She said, you are a member of the family, because that's how far back we go. So in conclusion, let me just say there is a shaping of James Turner before the Dr. James Turner that you know. He was for real. He was a serious brother. He was committed. And as you know, I mean, he associated himself with all of the great scholars. He brought Dr. Ben to Cornell University to teach. You don't get more controversial than Dr. Ben. I spent a lot of time with Dr. Ben in his house over at Lenox Terrace. You don't get more controversial than Dr. Ben. Dr. Ben at his memorial, one of the presentations that I made about Dr. Ben was really two things that encapsulate Dr. Ben for me. All right. Tenacious and uncompromising. Dr. Ben was tenacious and uncompromised. He took no prisoners. So with that,
and I forgot who said it, but somebody at the service pointed out that Dr. Turner was one of the few people that could more or less, in a pleasant way, handle Dr.
That was
Ben.
Al Cologne, Dr. Alan Cologne. Yeah, Al Cologne. Yeah, and he was. If anybody could cool Dr. Ben out, because when Dr. Ben went off, he went off on you all the way. He took no prisoners. He took no prisoners. He went. I seen him have a thing with Jay Carruthers. I mean, at the ASCAC convention. I'm an original member of ASCAC, an original member from its foundation, and I seen him go off, in Aswan on Jake. Dr. Ben took no prison, but James could cool him out. James was simply like that. And let me just say this in conclusion, because I know other people got to get in. The other members of his family are very much like James. Now, Wilbur, who was there on Saturday, seems to be very low-key. Wilbur speaks his mind, very, very clear. His sister Harriet, who was there, same way. Lorraine Turner, who was my age, who I traveled with and used to come to my class, was a dynamo. So with that, brothers and sisters, I got to run. Thank you for allowing me a few moments just to talk, personally about Dr. James Turner.
Hey, and we have more time.
Jared will have me back on again at some other time.
Anytime. Whenever you can, you're welcome here all the time.
Thank you so much. Rosa, good seeing you again. You know, I didn't get a chance much to talk to you on Saturday, but really good seeing you. And I may give you a call about something, okay?
Oh,
peace.
Absolutely. If you talk, yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Conyers.
Okay,
appreciate
peace.
you. All right,
Yeah.
peace. Professor Dylan Rodriguez joins us as well, and any of you can jump in if you like. I did want to, since you were here, Dylan, I had marked off because your opening paragraph, and I just wanted to read this here in your contribution to Discourse on Africana Studies, published on Kwasi's Publishing, edited by Scot Brown, who we think is going to join us at some point as well. You said something here that really captures a lot, man. So if I can, I want to just open up with your introductory paragraph and then let you take it from there. You said, I am one among many who has been indelibly formed by the liberatory urgency and collectivist political desires of Black radicalism generally, and Professor James Turner's uncompromising and impactful pedagogy specifically. For those of us who have been his students, there is an unshakable intensity embedded within the complex meanings, dynamic internal contradictions, and living historical possibilities of Black nationalism that is inseparable from Turner's nuanced and incisive socio-political framings of this trajectory of the Black liberation struggle. Perhaps having even greater gravity, however, are the intimacies we share with Turner as part of an always still emerging community of militancy and struggle, often striving for practical unity while struggling to constructively engage in political debate and internal, i.e. both interpersonal and intra-communal critique. I thought that was a perfect start to your essay and a perfect segue to bring you into this conversation. Thank you for joining us, Dylan, and jump on in.
I'll reserve my comments and be very short. But thanks for inviting me, and what's up, everyone? So I'm having trouble accepting that he's gone. Sorry, it's early here.
No, it's all good, man. Take your time, man. It's all good.
I'm on the West Coast. But I'll repeat back what I think I might have said to you before, and maybe even said on your show before, Jared, which is when I was finishing school with him, and I sat down with him. I mean, the biggest question I had is how the hell he survived, because they hated him. I mean, they hated him. Like they burned the building down, you know, within a year of his being there. I mean, we know the stories, right? They hated him. And at the same time, we loved him, you know. So that was always my question: is how do you sustain over this long a period of time under that condition of permanent antagonism, living with that intensity of embrace and love and really dependence. We were like, I was dependent on him. Like I needed him. And there were all these people who had no idea, and they wanted to burn it down again. You know, you could feel it, like all the time. You could feel it. And so I remember asking him, like, how do you do this? Because, you know, I was a kid, I was 21, and I didn't know how this was gonna go, you know. And he said that the first thing was unexpected. He said you have to build a community, you have to surround yourself with people who fundamentally support you. So that was, for some reason, coming from him, that was really profound, because, like, you know, we have a tendency to want to valorize these teachers of ours as if they're these individual warriors, right, or individual figures. And he made it very clear he was not, you know, that he had to be supported. And so that was a really vulnerable and humbling statement that he made. And then he went from there, of course, typical Professor Turner, I mean, my next question was about how can you be one of the only people I know who, in my experience, as you've gotten chronologically older, your militancy has gotten stronger. You know what I mean? Like that doesn't happen often. The narrative is usually to the contrary, both the self narrative and then the kind of historical narrative. So I said, I want to know how that works, you know, because I like, that's how I feel myself, but I don't know that that's true. So I want to know I want to know how that works. And that's where he said some words that, and then I'm gonna shut up after this. He said some words that stuck with me for a while in a certain kind of way where I was just wondering what the hell he meant. But he said you have to embrace the role of being an intellectual guerrilla fighter. Right? He said you got to embrace the role of being an intellectual guerrilla fighter. And then he invests a lot of faith in me. He goes, he said, I trust that you're not going to be one of the ones that gets picked off. Right. And he said, when you embrace the role of an intellectual guerrilla fighter, you don't get picked off. And it's not about some kind of individual path to militancy. It's because you embrace your assignment, you know your role, you know, you surround yourself with people who will embolden and also depend on you. And, you know, I got to tell you, it took me 10 years to understand that he literally meant guerrilla fighter. You know, like he blew my head when he said that, you know, because I was like, okay, what kind of, you know, how am I going to, it took me 10 years where I understood, oh, he actually meant it that way. Right. He actually meant that intellectuals have this very particular role they play, usually above ground, but not always above ground, in sustained, protracted guerrilla liberatory war. So I try to live with that all the time. I'm gonna shut up, but like, thank you for inviting me. And sorry, it took me a minute just to get the words out, y'all.
No, man, I appreciate that, and there's no rush. I definitely appreciate that, and I'm also glad that you mentioned, because one of the things that I said at the top was that in my own insufficient commemoration, I had left out a lot of the history of Dr. Turner in terms of the history of the center, his background, and I just focused on some of the work that I experienced and all of that. But as someone even asked in the chat in response to what you said, Dylan, that the original center, the center that exists today is, and anyone can correct me, is at least the third iteration of the center. The first building was burnt down by the racist Ithaca community that didn't want it there. The center that I experienced was one that was rebuilt intentionally to include a lot of brick so that it would be more resistant to another attempt at arson. And to Dylan's point, even when there was not a specific literal attempt to burn the building, there was a constant hostility directed from the university at Turner and his colleagues and comrades, and from the community more broadly speaking at the center and its existence and its work itself. So thank you, Dylan, for reminding us of that. And I'll use that as the segue to anyone else who wants to jump in and add on or respond to anything that was said there. And I saw Joaquin Morante in the chat, so shout out to you as well, brother. It's good to see you. And though I kind of don't know why you're not up here, but I will just say that Joaquin had pointed out that Dr. T had picked him up and drove him to court when he got in trouble and stayed for his arraignment. And I know he was not the only one, and that Dr. Turner always had the back of the kids in the city of Ithaca. And just in general, he had a focus on those, most powerless and most oppressed. So, anyway, does anybody? Yeah, please go ahead.
I want to respond to something you said, Dylan, because right before you came in, Dr. Conyers said this thing that echoes what you were talking about. He was trying to tell us about the community that Turner emerges from, and the social clubs that he led and also moved with. And what it occurs to me is that Africana Studies Research Center was built long before arriving in Ithaca, right? It was carried in people's hearts and in people's practices and the way that they moved together. knew how to move together long before arriving in Ithaca, long before taking up space there. And so that thing that he shared with you about always being in community, and knowing how to discern who to trust, it just seems like one of those things that is part of the ethos, right? It's part of the way that we know how to love in the world, is moving together in community. And when I think about what it means to be under attack and to not have community all the time, I remember something that Daryl Thomas at Penn State told me one time at NCOPS. Daryl said, the room is never empty. You know, you may not be able to see the community that you have. You may not be able to see them and touch them. They may not be able to offer space with your kids. They may not be able to show up at the baseball game, but the room is never empty. And the ancestors are always traveling with you. The living and the dead are always, always, always with us. So I want to offer you that, because we both ended up in California, and you've been part of my community, and you've represented that Africana spirit with incredible volume and passion and rigor, an enormous amount of self-respect. And as one of your California people, I just want to say the room is never empty.
Right on. Thank you very much. We all, I know, all appreciate that. Professor Asi Lumumba, you said you had more you wanted to share. One of the things that struck me from your comments on Saturday was that as of all the people I've ever met, you are as engaged literally with the diaspora as anybody. I mean, every time I hear from you or see you, you have visited some other part of the African diaspora 3 or 4 times over. And yet, and when you mentioned the other day, something to the effect that everywhere you went and everywhere you've been, Turner's name reverberates, is honored, is respected. People asking you about his condition and the state of things. If you would say a word about that, and then go on to anything else.
Yes, that's indeed, it is amazing. But the longer I stayed here, the more I found it almost normal. The way Professor Turner was true to the message, what it takes to be engaged permanently, the commitment. So he traveled a lot himself. That's something I found. People knew about the program, about the fight he was involved in, about the accomplishments. But he used to travel a lot. And when I come back from some of the trips, I go to see him, that he would share an experience, some experience he had in East Africa, between 2 countries, little things that happened that had a meaning in his analysis. Trying to buy something, let's say in Tanzania, and then the store owner said, I don't have it, but where are you going from here? Well, I'm going to Nairobi. When you arrive in Nairobi, go at such and such address. I'm going to tell whoever owned that store to get one for you, something like that. So he traveled across the African continent. He had experiences at the market somewhere in a free town, or many times in Ghana. So he was known as a person, as a committed scholar, as somebody who gave meaning to scholarship. Real scholarship is not only writing books and sitting in offices or going to libraries. It's also transforming the society, engaging with the people. So that's one of the fronts on which he was known. He was sincere in his commitment. So yes, indeed, I have been accustomed to hearing people ask, you from you teaching at Cornell and the Africana, how is James Turner? That has come again and again, and I'm sad that next time I travel, by God's grace, when they ask me, I will not be able to give the same answer. So that was one element that I found striking. And also some of those trips, he took them with the family. So from Dean Turner's side, I had also stories, experiences in Ghana. And actually they have become member of families in different places. So that's the more I hear, the more I feel fortunate to have had the opportunity to share the same space with such a giant, but was so humble at the same time. You see him in a place, you don't know who he is. Well, he came from this origin that Dr. Conyers was mentioning. He remembers always where he was coming from the real people. There are also other stories he shared, comments. He had knowledge about so many fields. I would like to share with you one of my profound regrets. When he could no longer come to the Africana, I called regularly as I could, to inquire about how he was doing. I usually call in the evening. Sometimes he was having his dinner, so Dean Turner would tell me, can we call you back? So we always made the arrangement. And one of the last discussions I had with him before he was admitted to the hospital, well, it was a conversation when it was still the winter, this severe winter that we went through. He said, when the weather is a little more clement, I hope we can organize a get-together, potluck, either in your house or in the Hot Fuller room. There are certain dishes, when we had those potluck, I cooked and I knew which one he liked. So I was ready. I told him, yes, let this weather go away and we will come back together. Let this COVID disappear and we will meet. So I was ready to receive him in our house. He was most generous with my entire family. My husband is a political scientist. So in the many gestures that he made, he will give me a book. It's on detente. I'm sure Brother Tukubi will make good use of it. So he gave books to me, to the children, and to my husband. So that sense of family, that is very real, and also real across the continent of Africa and beyond. It's not only in Africa that I have been asked how he is doing. It's also elsewhere in Europe. I shared on Saturday this experience. One of my mentors, he was not my professor, is a French sociologist, Rémi Clignet, who taught in the US and then later retired back home. And I go to his home to greet him and his wife every time I'm in France. So I went to see him early 90s when I came here, and we were talking. He was always very curious. So where exactly are you at Cornell? So I explained to him and gave him a little bit of history of the Africana Studies and Research Center, and who was very instrumental in both the designing the program, conceptualizing it, and also implementing it. I work on innovations. So these are different dimensions. You can contribute great ideas and all that. And then other people will have to implement. In this case, he did both. So I was talking about this great person, inspiring. He said, but who is he? And then eventually I say, oh, his name is James Turner. When I say James, I say, what? James Turner? James Turner? The most brilliant student I had at Northwestern University. Is that him? I say, well, I understand that he went to Northwestern University. So unless there were several James Turners there, this is the brilliant student you had. He said, well, we write books, and he has published immensely himself. He had done a lot of other works, but he said to build an institution, an institutional unit, especially in the context we know, is not an easy thing. So I want to go to that center. It was not, is it possible? He told me I must go to see what James Turner has done. So when I came back, I told Professor Turner, and as I mentioned on Saturday, arrangements were made for Professor Clemente to come. The sense of pride. He said, yes, I knew you would do something unique with your sharp intellect, with your commitment. And he did many other things at Northwestern before he became the builder of Africana studies here. So the point I'm making is not only on the African continent that they ask about him, it's also in many other places, including in Asia, when my colleagues at the Hiroshima University were really curious about how you create a unit like Africana Studies, knowing the context, the global context. So this is what I wanted to say in response to your question about.
No, I appreciate that, and even the other day we had a semester opening faculty meeting, and among colleagues I had never met before at Morgan State, and we were asked to go around and introduce ourselves, and I just as I always do, I say I went to the Africana Studies and Research Center, specifically under the directorship of its founding director, Dr. James Turner, who we just laid to rest this weekend, as I said the other day, and two faculty members, two colleagues of mine that I've at least theoretically known and been around for almost 20 years, chimed up and said, "Oh my goodness, I didn't even know, that he was gone," and that they took a few minutes to honor him, having met and interacted with him. So it's like everywhere you go, especially if you're involving Africana studies or Black politics or something related to diaspora, Turner's name rings out. And I always want to make sure from jump that people know, like, I'm in his lane. So like, if you got an issue with that, like, we could be clear from the beginning. Anyway, anyone else want to?
Yeah.
May I just add quickly? Sorry, Kwasi. There was this bright woman from Kenya who was working at the United Nations. And she said, well, the system is so much about process, But we need great ideas. We need thinkers. And she asked me, can you arrange for Professor Turner to join us in some of this discussion? We did, and it was great. So he was across all the institutions, academia, the community, the United Nations. Sorry, go ahead.
Should I go? Or
yeah, jump on in.
Okay. My apologies. Rosa, did you want to go? Okay, cool. I'll jump in. I'll keep this brief. To Dylan's point, certainly, and to Jared's too, you have to be calculated in terms of the cost of an allegiance to Turner, right? Because there was a price to pay, depending upon which circles you move. And for me, it was a non thinking motion. It was natural. In fact, when I was a student there, I was already tagged with being a Turnerite, and I didn't care really, because the people who did that tagging were cowards anyway. And people that know me, I don't roll with cowards. And so I didn't care, for their labeling or their caricature, because to me, Turner, among a few other faculty there, Dr. Lumumba included, these were not cowards, and these are the people that I wanted to roll with. And so, it was clear to me that I had no apology, I had no need for concession. That this is what it is. And but it was a certain calculus, certainly, for those who I think who lack the courage to take those positions. But the other side of it is what Professor Lumumba referred to early on. I remember I was in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro, and I went to visit the great late Abdias Nascimento, Pan-Africanist, scholar, theater, for decades. And I went to his apartment, and we were chopping it up. And, he said to me, first it came out of his mouth when he asked me my background, and I mentioned Africana Center, he said, James Turner.
Yeah.
And he just lit up.
Yeah.
He says, oh, yes. And of course, we were speaking in Portuguese. And he says, oh, yes, James Turner, how's he doing? Oh, it was great. And he goes on and on about Turner. And he signs a few books for me, and he says, wow, this is wonderful. And so actually he met Turner, through me in that particular moment. But it goes to show you, how far and wide in the African world that Turner's name and more so his persona radiates far and wide. And I appreciate that kind of cover and that kind of connection. And that's why, again, I have an allergic reaction to the cowards who want to keep their distance from Turner, or who want to sabotage Turner by saying, well, he's misogynist, he's this, he's that, because all that cowardice, really pales, as fox, as foolishness in terms of the sort of global resonance and impact and connections that he forged over those decades. So to me, it's really a lot of clown work, when I hear those kinds of gossip and whispers, because, then and now and thereafter, I'm riding with Turner.
All day, every day. Scot Brown, thanks for joining us, professor of Africana Studies all over the place, and editor of this great and powerful book, among other works. We appreciate you. Also, just I would be remiss if in not including just passingly a reference to your expertise in music and funk in particular. And I want to shout you out for your impact in a positive way in that field, in that area on me as well. So welcome, and let me just invite you to join the conversation.
Sure. Yeah, I know you probably already with such a powerful group of folks, you've probably already said a whole lot, if not certainly leaving very little room to add. But I can just add one part that I'm sure was said earlier, and that is that what I benefited from with Dr. Turner, I think many of us did, was he allowed us to grow intellectually. He allowed me to grow in a way that he knew some of the pitfalls that I was headed towards, but still would allow me to go through it. And I think at that age, when I came to Africana in 1991, I taught high school for a year. I had a lot of different ideas. And, when you're in grad school, the relationship between ideas that are formulated that we bond to, sometimes it's almost with the neophyte zeal. And what was so powerful about Dr. Turner for me was that he could already see down a road that I was going to run into some problems, but he would kind of walk you through it. It was like, so now, did you read this, brother? Are you aware of this? And he kind of would pause and he would say, check this book out here. But he never really put down a ironclad sensibility around, you need to know this, you need to know this, or else. And it was also rarely, and never about him when it came to bodies of ideas. He seemed to respect Black thought, which is, something that is rare, I find, where you can appreciate strands of Black thought that you even disagree with, that he disagreed with, but he could say, as long as you were serious about it, and you were rigorous in your engagement with it, he could coexist and still nurture you as if you were following his own set of priorities and perspectives around Black nationalism. So I really benefited tremendously from that as I went from examining cultural nationalism, examining revolutionary nationalism, examining internationalism, Pan-Africanism. He always kind of let you find your way, while still at the same time, it's a fine line, emphasizing some clear priorities. The other thing I want to say about Dr. Turner, which has probably already been said as well, but I'll underscore it, is that he genuinely, we have this phrase that people say, I'm happy for you. I'm happy for you. You can hear they're not happy because of the way they say it. I'm happy for you. He genuinely was happy for his students' success and students' achievement in the real world was genuinely a part of how he identified and measured his own success. So whenever he would hear about someone doing well, and he'd share it with me, so-and-so is doing this, this brother here is doing this, this sister here is doing that. That was his badge of honor. And it's also, he never had to say, I'm happy for you. You felt his joy in his students and the sincerity of it in the way that he kind of shared and promoted it, what his students arrived at. So those are two kind of more on the interpersonal level and around the level of just his example as a teacher. And how do you deal with students on a one-on-one basis as they go through? I mean, I look at students today and I see some of the zeal. I see myself. I see them headed for some of the same challenges that I did, but I have to go back to Dr. Turner to say, you know what, let them find their way.
Mm-hmm. You when you mentioned that issue about the trying to prevent you from hitting certain pitfalls, I remember shortly after 9/11, I was on the phone with him, and he said, I remember him saying to me, I'm encouraging Jared that you and others be judicious in your, that was the word he used, in your response, because I think like he knew some of us a little hot-headed and quick with the language, and he was like judicious. He said, I was like, yeah, let me try to keep myself out of a CIA black site and listen to Turner a little bit. But anyway, anyone else want to? Yeah, go ahead, Rose. Yeah.
No, that's funny because I can't hear. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. That's funny because I had talked to Dr. Turner when I went to South Africa for the UN Conference Against World Racism. I was part of the Durban 400 around reparations. And I landed in New York 5 minutes after we saw the first World Trade Center get hit. Because I had been, at my last part, I was in Cape Town. And I called Dr. Turner. I was trying to call my mom, and I was like, let me see Dr. Turner. Because I was like, I need some money. I have to leave now. And the people I was with was like, why? I'm like, I had a crazy dream last night. If I don't leave, I'm going to be stuck here for a long, long time. You know, so I called my mom. She was like, I don't even know how to get you money. And I got to Dr. Turner, and like in a couple hours, I had like the 200 I needed to change my flight. And anyway, so I landed in New York as the other tower was crumbling. And late that night, I called Dr. Turner, and he kind of said the same thing, because I was doing radio at that time. He's like, listen, the whole world doesn't need to know how you're exactly thinking right now, especially because you just came from a conference that finally has said that, you know, slavery was a crime against humanity, and coming from a conference where Palestinian rights were, you know, being lifted up, and then also a conference where it was like Fidel Castro, the older brother from Palestine, what was his name?
Arafat.
Yes, Arafat, and Nelson Mandela. And we have a picture with all three of them, our group, you know. And so I came back, I finally got to see Dr. Turner a year or so later. I showed him everything, you know. And I think for me, because I haven't been in the academy consistently, like, just, I'm grateful that he even created a term of scholar activism, because it means we're both, like, I'm a scholar and an activist, and you all are scholars and activists. Like, it gave us more than just, quote, the academic, you know. And then lastly, like, I'm angry at how they treated Dr. Turner at this last decade. You know, I firmly believe that if he hadn't been under all that stress and all this being ripped from him, you know, he would be here longer. But I see that trend happening in all the remaining good Black studies departments. Like, they don't want Black and Puerto Rican studies anymore in CUNY. You know, what does that mean for our comrade Anthony Brown? And then just in general, like, they're destroying everything that generation did. And then we're in these political moments where, even though we're all connected, how can you fight for something when you're not exactly there? And what does that look like? But I think, like, I was thinking of something Dr. Turner always said. You know, he said a historian should always look and ask who has not been included, who has not been taught to. You know, and I think that's what's happening with academia. I think young people are, every institution is a failure. They're living it. You know, so the last conversation I had with Dr. Turner was a little difficult, but we were able to talk. And I literally was like, I am lost. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. Like, I don't get how we got from all of us, how we came up in the 80s and 90s and to now. You know, like, I don't get it. And he said, no, you absolutely do get it. You got to keep pushing more, because they are coming harder. And that could look very different now than it did in my generation. You know, what are y'all willing to do? And I was like, I think it's a harder conversation, because even though we're connected, we're all not connected. Like, it's different when we're all in the space of Africana. Like, Scott, you were there, I was there, Jared comes later. But, you know, just the space alone, it gives such an energy of excitement and beauty and debate and love, and not hating each other, not canceling, not trying to one up each other. Like, that's what I miss, you know? And the more elders go, we might be missing that. And we got to figure out a better way of how we come together outside of the traditional coming together in academia. Like, what does that look like to carry on Turner's legacy of also pure love and undying commitment to Black liberation?
Right on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody? You go.
May I
please?
add,
Yeah.
Yes, that he celebrated his student success. He celebrated his colleagues' success.
Mm-hmm.
That's something, you know, big and small achievements. He was there.
Mm-hmm.
You have some kind of acknowledgement on Central Campus. He will be there. You're giving a talk somewhere in another department. He will be there to support you.
Yeah.
That's something that I find really amazing. How he found the time. Somebody was talking about that earlier. How did he find the time to be everywhere where he was needed? But I remember, this is a little thing, but it gives you an idea of who he was and still is. I remember receiving a letter from the late Kofi Annan, who was the head of the United Nations. And he was inviting me to a meeting in his institution in Geneva. And I shared the letter when I was preparing for my trip. And I needed to write something to another administrator. And Professor Turner told me, when you write, make sure you quote Mr. Annan. Don't paraphrase it. Because he said in his letter, you are among a few global thinkers that I have invited. He was this idea of global thinker. He said, don't paraphrase it, quote it. So it's just something that I found very specific in terms of Professor Turner's ability to celebrate you, to fight for you. My 10-year process here, because I was then affiliated with what has become FGSS, Women's Studies. It was not my work, but it was something that, we don't have the time and it's not necessary. At the time, Professor Turner had come back as a director of Africana Studies. That's what made it possible for me to stay here. Because he was not just fighting, he was fighting with the argument, the substance of your work. Why your work is relevant, even if somebody might think that is not relevant, because it's not consistent with the ideas they had about African women, African societies. Definitely you are historically, intellectually in a better position to articulate that. Therefore, he made those points using your work. He doesn't just praise you. And sometimes subtly he doesn't reprimand, but he will speak in a way that you would understand that you have to look at something critically. Mm-hmm. The other thing I want to say is he was a principled person. Mm-hmm. I remember some other colleague asked me a long time back, what is it? You always talking about principle, principle, principle. What is it? There must be consistency. You don't change your language because we're a certain group and you want to please them, you want to appease them. Mm-hmm. You stay true to the substance of the message, what needs to be done, what needs to be said. But one thing, my really call is that the system, because it's operate on this binary ground, either or, they never understood. Mm-hmm. Turner was a humanist who wanted the whole world to be better. He was not teaching ideas for one group only. That's why his classes became so popular across campus. Hundreds of students enrolled. the course that he was teaching with Professor Barr? Well, it's because those who understood knew better. They knew that they needed that knowledge, those critical perspectives.
And if I can just so people understand what you were saying there, for those who weren't aware, Professor Bard, I'm forgetting his first name at this point, but was Don Barr, a white professor who he and Turner co-taught a course on race going back forever. And it was a very popular course. I mean, it stayed packed even through the time I was there. For sure. So just wanted to add that in there. Sorry, go ahead.
So the point I was making is that it was not the classroom of 100. You couldn't see only Black students across the board, because those who were really understood Turner's position realized that they would learn skills to navigate the world. That Turner didn't want only Black people to make it. He wanted everybody. So the fact that he wanted those who have been marginalized, those who have been deprived of the right to make it, doesn't mean he doesn't want anybody else to make it. That's something that was completely misunderstood. Actually, I have been writing more about the Ubuntu philosophy. Turner was operating within that framework, that we in together. It's our collective well-being. Don't deprive others. So this is something that the system didn't understand sufficiently in operating with the binary either or. And they saw him as not being capable of embracing the entire humanity. He was, but he didn't embrace contradictions, the marginalization, the suffering of some people throughout history. So these are some of the aspects that I think I should mention. And I hope we will have other opportunities. There's so much.
So listen, first of all, absolutely. I know we have to wrap in a few minutes, but to you all who are here and who have come here this morning, to anyone who will see this later, anyone who ever wants to use this particular platform to talk about Dr. Turner will always be welcome, or associated work or politics is always welcome here. So no one has to think that this is the end of this particular set form of commemorating him or that work. I'm happy to have as many of these conversations. I love seeing all of you as well. So as often as you all want to come here, if I can use, have Dr. Turner be the cause of that, that's great. But let each of you who are still here take it, any concluding words for today. You're all again welcome back anytime to do more. And you're all doing incredible work beyond a discussion just of Dr. Turner. So I'm happy to have you discuss that as well. But
I would say,
go ahead. Yeah.
One more thing to add, there's a reason that Latinos like me, definitely those of us that identify racially as Black and people of African descent, Africana studies was the only place that someone like me could go and be fully embraced. Because, and it's taken me years to really realize that, like, Latino studies will never have me, whatever, Latin American, they never wanted me. None of these programs wanted me. They didn't want to mentor me. They did tell me if I stopped talking about being Black and just talk about being a Latino, I could do that. But Dr. Turner created that space for many Afro-Black and Latina people like me, where we could come in and really understand the world as, around, and also what Africana actually means, So I think that's also something that should be uplifted more, because we're out here and we're carrying out that tradition, out of Africana studies that Dr. Turner taught us.
No doubt. And at Big Teal, these folks are all individually and collectively welcome back here, and I hope that I've made that clear. But if not, let me just say it again to each of you. You're more than welcome to come back. Anybody else? There were a couple. If we just quickly here, as there were some comments I highlighted. My man, Dr. Todd Stephen Burrows, thanks for this kind of conversation. I agree. I meant to get to this one while Dr. Conyers was still here, but did Dr. Turner have any nicknames? Go ahead, Professor Brown. What?
There was the class that came before me. I came in the summer before I started in '91, so there were some things that did not continue on to our class that certain people were saying. That some people called him by his initials, JT. I think
right.
That ended with that class before I came. I think there was someone overheard a comrade of his. He had a nickname when he was with one of the street youth groups that he worked with. He was known as Reno. And that was funny because when I was interviewing him about, him being in a gang called the Sportsmen, he talked about what he was doing. He showed me some of the articles where he was being interviewed as a member of the Sportsmen, and they referred to him in this piece as Reno. And that's one of the few times I kind of got him out of his more serious posture, as I could tell he was thinking back on whatever state of mind he was in when he was doing that interview. And so those are the two that I'm familiar with.
Right on. Thank you for that. Definitely. Thanks for the super chat, CD. Cornell Class 99 lost touch with Dr. Turner and Janice, who was my dean and academic advisor. Would love if anyone on the panel could put me in touch with Janice to extend my condolences. I know she retired. What's the best way to reach her? Thanks for the super chat, CD. And I honestly, I wouldn't know how to answer that, Dr. Brown. I don't know if you want to help out there, or if you have any suggestions, Professor Asi Lumumba. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I think I can. I'll check on being able to see if I can find an email for the person. So, Jared, I could figure out the email address and maybe forward it to you. And
okay, sure. And CD, email me at imixwhatilike@gmail.com. imixwhatilike@gmail.com, and I'll see if I can help in any way. Again, and thanks, Megan, for the super chat. Appreciate that. And yes, this is part of our endeavor to be B-SPAN, a Black C-SPAN. Brian Lazinski, shout out to you as well. I'm forever grateful to Dr. Turner. I could see with crystal clarity that he put me on a different life trajectory. He pulled us into a tradition of liberation and allowed us to find our own path by exposing us to the myriad of Black social and political thought. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why, Coco, I'm always going to let them know I'm in Dr. Turner's camp. Like Kwasi was saying, I want people have got to know that's the lane I'm in. And if you're not in that lane, that's cool. Then we just not on the same team. And this, that's it. That's it, And Dr. Turner was absolutely an internationalist. I mean, he was as proud of the Black American community as could be, as the African community here in the United States as he could be, but also clear that he was part of the African diaspora and very much about the solidarity of dispersed or diaspora Africans. No question about that. Yeah. Sorry,
and
go ahead.
People should know that he's a founding member of Trans Africa. That he coordinated the delegation for the 6th Pan-African Congress. He went to Ethiopia. Like, that's why all over the world he is respected. He went to Puerto Rico, I know, right before the Navy put out a Vieques for an event to free our remaining political prisoners. Like, that's why he's been all over the world doing the work. I mean, a professor's not even a good name, I'm like, Dr. Turner is like the epitome of a grassroots intellectual, like that's who we are as a people, and he wasn't that type of professor just writing, that was not the best process for him, you know? I remember talking to him about it. There's really good writers, and sometimes there's people, it's hard. But I mean, the level of work that I'm sure we don't even know about yet, that's what I'm interested in, like, uncovering as we continue out here to do something bigger for Dr. Turner in the future.
Absolutely. Yeah. Dr. Asi Lumumba, Dr. Brown, Dr. Rodriguez, any concluding thoughts for us this morning before we wrap up this, again, component piece to a series of ongoing tribute to Dr. Turner?
Yeah, I'll let Dylan go ahead.
I'll be quick, y'all. Just a couple things. One one thing that I think we haven't said enough is that Dr. Turner was funny as hell.
Yeah.
He told stories that would have our classes, you know, almost physically on the floor. And he would have this subtle physical humor that no one else could imitate. So I just want to commemorate that part of him, because he brought that to the room, to the space anytime he was really with us. I mean, he would share stories, and I remember when I saw him, you know, 15 years after I graduated, we sat down for dinner, or no, I'd seen him for the first time, and he gave me a big hug and all that. And he had this way of talking, and he said, "Hey, wow, you know, you really look the same. You're just a little bit more substantial." I was like 20 pounds bigger than I was when I graduated. And he's like, you're just a little bit more substantial. And he's kind of
that's amazing.
That's Dr. Turner. And you know, and I took it.
Yeah, man, when I first showed up, when I lost my hair and I just cut it all off, and I showed up, he said you know, he could make his eyes real big, and he said something like, "Jared, so what, you going through something, Jared?" Like, I was like, man, I just lost my hair, Dr. Turner. I just, anyway, go ahead.
No, and you know, so I took every one of his classes as an undergraduate student in Africana. I took every single one of his classes. And I remember one of my friends and classmates, that was not an Africana studies major. He had taken one of Dr. Turner's classes. That was enough for him, right? And I remember he came by my my dorm room, whatever. It was one of my friends who's a Black student at Cornell, Black American student at Cornell. And I mentioned, yeah, I've taken all of Dr. Turner's classes. And it's talking about eyes got big. My friend's eyes got big, and he goes, "Are you on crack?" So I'm on your show in public to tell you, yes, I was on crack. That's the only way I could get through all of Dr. Turner's classes. But you know, here's the last thing I want to say about Dr. Turner for today, anyways. Is that I think the challenge that we permanently inherit from him and from others that he inherited this challenge from is this practice of principled generosity under conditions of war. I mean, that's what I think he was doing. That's what I think he was doing. I think I learned about the Black Liberation Army in an office hours conversation with him, right? That's how I came to know about what the BLA was. And so it's that combination of having such principled militant generosity under conditions of war. That is hard as hell to do, but he did it beautifully and eloquently, and almost in a way where you didn't even realize that's what he was doing. But he taught me all those things, and that's, I think, the ongoing legacy that I think you know, it's a responsibility to inherit that.
Right on.
Yeah, I just want to say real quick, I think Africana studies is wherever our feet stand. So that's, I think, part of what we have to also realize. And he was aware that the ethic of Africana wasn't just located in that department, that he expected us to go out and expand the realm of Black freedom. And that's supposed to happen with us. And we're fighting all these battles in different spaces, but that's Africana as well. Even if the department itself goes through its transformations, we also are out here trying to change the world and reflect really the vision that he taught us.
Right on. Right on.
Yeah. Well, I would like to say that I hope we have a chance to talk about the broader commitment, what he did on campus, because I served with him as a faculty fellow in Ujamaa. He served as faculty in residence on North Campus. So these are dimensions of his commitment that we didn't have time to talk about. But I would like to end by using this Akan proverb, that when a good person, and good here is not a good translation, because the term in the language, original language, it means a good person. It reflects the entire being, good from within, beautiful. So it's not a proper translation, but it's the closest words. So when a good person transitions, his, her, or their name becomes a wealth that everybody inherits. So Professor Turner, as he was already an ancestor, but now has transitioned, but even before that, his name was already a wealth that everybody felt great being associated with. So now that he's there, the battle that he engaged must continue. You heard the proverb I gave on Saturday, when we were facing some kind of another misunderstanding of what Africana is about, and the struggle at the time when he had announced his retirement. And I went to talk to him that you have this way of guiding us through these situations. Can you wait a few more years? And then he said, well, nobody should feel that he, she, or they are indispensable. I have done, the message was, he had done his part. It's time for others to carry the battle on. But then I use this proverb, but I preface the proverb. So he was amused. What is this proverb that you are talking, dancing around? That it may give a wrong impression, that the images of Africa, where they think that I'm from Cote d'Ivoire, therefore we have pet elephants and things, these images I don't want. But the proverb, this is what, it's a sister, can you tell me that proverb? So I said, the proverb says, when the lion that is chasing you is not tired, you can't afford to say, I am tired. They say, wow, you made your point. However, is it possible to trick the lion to exit or climb a tree or go where the lion can't go? But the point I'm making is that he feels that other people must carry on with the struggle. But there's an explanation that needs to be done. He was not fighting only for Black people. He was fighting for the people who are the most marginalized, who are underrepresented. So his framework was broader than being Black. If being Black means being oppressed, that's what he was talking about. So especially what are our reflection in this era of the COVID? It has taught us that unless we are all well, nobody will be really well. Nobody. So we need to create a different world. We need to have a new framework of the world where everybody would count. When everybody counts, we all are well. The well-being of those who have been marginalized is connected to the well-being of those who have everything or think they have everything. So that's another level of Turner's legacy that we must really take on. And again, I invite you to engage with the idea of Ubuntu, that we are interconnected, that we need to create a new world. And those who have been advantaged need to understand that they have also something to gain when we change the world. So these are some of the work that we need to do. As he was saying, take it to another level, continue the struggle, taking into account the new structures, internal, external, global. So I want to thank you, Jared. You're doing a fantastic job for holding this space for us to share some of our thoughts. So I thank you all. I'm proud of all of you for having seen you through and for carrying on with the message, the struggle for a better world. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Asi Lumumba. Have I missed anybody? Has anybody not gotten at least a temporarily concluding comment for this?
Well,
Kwasi, were you trying to go ahead? Yeah,
I won't conclude because this is ongoing.
Right on.
And I think the spirit of Turner would want it that way. But I'll say very quickly that lions are afraid of elephants, which means we can't do this work alone or isolation. We have to be as big as the elephant in the face of the lion.
Right on. Word up. Hey, at the risk of ruining that perfect ending, listen. Big shout out to all of you who joined all of us this morning, to those who were not able to join us and will join us later. Peace and welcome to you as well. To all of you in the audience who are live today, thank you for joining us. To those who will see and hear this later, thank you. Do all of the things to support the channel and continue this work and this legacy. And thank you all very much for coming through this morning. And as always, because we know he constantly did and will continue to on the other side, fight for that peace. Like Fred Hampton said, peace to you, because we know he and we all will continue to fight for it. So peace, everybody. Thanks again. Until next time, take care.
Thank you.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.